Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast. I'm your host, as always, Nate Crespo, and today we have a very special guest. He's a University of California, Berkeley School of Law graduate and currently works as a principal at Optimized Legal Solutions LLC and as a writer and creator of the Empirical SCOTUSblog. He's held past positions as an attorney at Kendall, Brill, and Killinger, and as a fellow at Columbia Law School. Honored to have him on the show today, Mr. Adam Feldman. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today?
Doing pretty well, just getting over a cold, so a little bit nasal, but otherwise things are good, and I'm excited to be here.
Very good. I'm excited you're here as well. Now, Adam, before we get started, can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Sure. So my name is Adam Feldman. Like you said, Nate, I'm a lawyer as well as I have a PhD in political science, and so I write about the Supreme Court. I study the Supreme Court. I publish articles about it, and I also teach a few classes in college level political science that are at Cal State University Northridge and focuses on upper division law, including Supreme Court and constitutional law.
Yeah, so I found it very interesting doing some research before coming onto this podcast today. Um, you definitely have a lot going on in your life, which I love. I always love the busy life. I said
Yeah,
last episode, I hope to be busy like that one day. Um,
you might you regret saying that down the line. So glad we're holding on to this audio.
listen, only time will tell. I'll come back and listen to this and be like, hey, maybe Adam was right that one day.
All
Uh,
right.
But starting off with your sort of journey to the law, I think this is a very interesting episode because you interact with the law in sort of a non-traditional sense. I don't imagine you're in the courtroom or anything, but you're still teaching in school. You have your blog, and you are part of Optimized Legal Solutions, which I don't know what that is exactly, but we will get into it soon. Now,
Got it.
starting off, graduated from UCLA. You ended up going to Cal Berkeley. Can you talk about your decision to actually go to law school, why you did it, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I was interested in law since the end of high school, really from taking AP government. It seemed like something interesting to me, and I don't have any lawyers in the family, so I was kind of going at this, somewhat blind in terms of not having really any mentors to look up to at that point in time that were in law. But it seemed interesting to me as an idea going into college. I took a few law-related classes at UCLA. There weren't any kind of traditional upper division law classes at UCLA, so it was jurisprudence and it was legal theory much more than like looking at cases. And I saw greater interest in that. I have friends that were a few years ahead of me in law school, and it seemed really neat from an academic perspective and studies that I wanted to get into. So it was mostly from observation and seeing that this was really an interesting topic and stuff that I wanted to study and learn about. And so I towards the end of college decided that I was going to put myself out there, throw my hat into the ring, and give it a go. And I got into one of the schools that I was hoping to get into. The University of California system is great. Having in-state tuition is nice, and when you have a little bit of a scholarship on top of that, it's even nicer. So I was able to get into law school at a good school and not have to totally break into the loan bank. So yeah, a lot of different things collided and kind of set me on my way.
I think what's most important there and what's really special about this episode is that you're coming from an academic perspective. Usually past guests, it's a lot of, I'm interested in getting into the work of the field, sort of like that. But I think what makes this episode, what really interests me and what I found interesting about you and wanting to bring you on is because we haven't gotten that academic perspective on this podcast before. Now, talking about the first year, I always say it's traumatic because everyone tells me it's traumatic. Was it traumatic for you?
First semester was really bad. And it also goes back to this this not having really any mentors that were in this field. Because I think if I did, and that had kind of prepped me for what to expect, it would have been a lot easier. Law school is different than college and different from any experience that I've had in academics before that, where you're thrown a ton of information. You're not really tracked on how you're learning during the semester, and then you have a final at the end. And I didn't realize, I think that there's always been this kind of mechanism behind this madness where there's an expectation for how you write for law and how you think in a legal sphere. I'm a bit of a chameleon where I can find what I like and kind of change my colors in a way that fits the situation. So first semester was a bit overwhelming, and I didn't do anywhere near as well as I thought I was going to. I was hoping I was going to. But being kind of this having this ability to figure things out as I go along, has always been kind of a good trait for me. I use that to fuel my second semester and the rest of law school, where I used it to learn how to do better, how to think in a more analytic fashion, and was able to be successful in law school after that. Now, second year is where you get you kind of hopefully get an internship that turns into a job afterwards. So I think after that interview process and where I kind of had a sense of where I was going, that's where the stress level dipped pretty dramatically. But yeah, it's all kind of an overwhelming experience. You kind of get the fire hose shot right at you until you kind of get your feet wet, and then you develop a comfort level, and that's the way it worked out for me.
Well, it's very comforting to hear for me that, so even like you, a very successful person, you have a lot going on that you even, struggled a little bit your first year. But you're seemingly a very adaptable person, and that's like you said, a very important trait to have. I always work to make sure I have that sort of trait that, wherever I am, I could put my best foot forward, but kind
Right.
of make sure I know what I'm doing, learn very quickly.
Mhm.
That seems to be a theme with law school.
Yeah.
With the past episodes, it comes at you quick and you got to move even quicker.
Yeah.
So speaking of that summer legal internship that you got, you worked at CBS. I'm very interested. How was that?
So year one was at CBS. I'm from LA. I've done some work in the industry during towards the end of college. I did a little bit of work at HBO, just kind of assistant work, and was at some point I had these grandiose ideas of becoming a entertainment attorney, and doing transactional work actually in entertainment. But I also learned that there was a long, arduous process to get there. And frankly, through law school, I learned that there are a lot of other things to do, and interesting paths, and sometimes they combine in interesting ways. Through some of my contacts in the entertainment field, I was able to secure a internship year one, summer one in law school, to work at CBS in their in-house division. Fascinating stuff from my perspective, because they handle a lot of the things that go on behind the scenes that people don't always know about, but that affect their brand. So it was really anything from copyright issues, where there was one case where a company was producing slot machines in Vegas using some of the properties from CBS, and so we were suing against that use. Everything from that up until people that were reaching agreements in reality television, saying that they were going to give away some of what happens before it was aired if they don't get some piece of the pie. And so we had to work with some of their agreements and what they signed beforehand to make sure they didn't do that, and that was a bit of a extortion on their behalf. So it really kind of ran the gamut, and not only was it interesting in that respect, but it helped set in motion some other things down the road that I got to work on later in my after law school years.
Yeah, that's some real deal inside baseball right there.
Yeah,
From my perspective, I find that absolutely fascinating. I think
yeah,
the extortion, that's crazy. Um,
yeah.
I mean,
I
it
mean,
doesn't.
it just gets crazier from there. So there are other crazy stories that went on or that were going on behind the scenes. Yeah, it's pretty unique, I think, even in the legal sphere.
As a young law student, how was that sort of when you first sort of, saw the curtain raise a little bit,
Yeah.
and how were you surprised by it, or was it more of like I kind of knew this was going on?
Yeah. So I knew that, employment lawyers deal with some of these issues, just kind of craziness that goes on within corporations. And I wasn't aware that that was kind of what an in-house department deals with also. So yeah, there were really, really, kind of bizarre stories that went on, stuff that predated me significantly. Made sense, you're kind of blending the entertainment world with corporate America, that you'd have some of these things, but I wasn't anticipating that, I think, going in. So it was a bit of a surprise.
So something you had said before that you became interested in entertainment law, you wanted to do transactions, and obviously as time went on, you kind of refocused all these different paths. And I think something for me that I focused on a lot last year, which I found that I shouldn't, is sort of finding that field of law that I'd like to go into or like to pursue, start getting some early information on it. How did you sort of find your passion, and what sort of line of work you wanted to work in?
Well, I see myself as always a work in progress, and I'm generally open to new experiences and, like we talked about before, adapting to new situations. So I constantly am learning and also figuring out what works best for me. So, when I was looking at entertainment and doing it from that direction, I don't think I had anticipated in my head how much that one needs to do to get there to actually become the type of attorney that I was interested in doing and becoming. Um, and a lot of that was getting more of a generalist experience in law. And I quickly found that becoming a generalist trend lawyer, especially in a big firm environment, means sometimes being in the office for 48 hours straight, and working on it. If a deal is closing, I mean, you have to be there. If you need to bring hard copy papers to Kuala Lumpur, somebody gets sent to Kuala Lumpur for a day or two. So it's overwhelming, I think, and wasn't I'm a hard worker, but I'm also believe in like the necessity of having break times. And so a few of these like 24-hour plus sessions showed me that maybe the generalist transactional law is not right for me, but I was still interested in entertainment. But I refocused to more of a litigation standpoint. And also, during my second summer, which I summered at McDermott, Will and Emery, I was exposed to some appellate law, and found that really interesting because it has it's I think more of the analytic, the writing side, and it involves more research, in terms of like thinking outside the box. So I kind of had some taste of what that's like, and saw, okay, there's probably something interesting within these different confines of things that I'm figuring out that I enjoy and that are kind of drawing me in. So it's constantly refocusing, retooling, and I did that within law, and I'm still doing that when I'm kind of outside of legal practice looking in. So that's my way of working, and I know that I'm unique, and it's not for everybody.
That's extremely well said. I try to carry that myself, the sort of chameleon lifestyle, trying a lot of new things, especially with the appellate work. One of the previous guests I had on, Brian Ginsberg, he's an appellate attorney, and he had spoke about through the appellate system, kind of figuring out how you become this mini expert on many topics. I know he worked with there was like this river and there was like a dam or something in New York State, and he
Yeah,
basically had to learn everything about the biology behind it, like how the river appears, the way it moves, this like how the dirt gets in, all this stuff, and I
yeah,
found that fascinating,
yeah,
in terms of not only the sort of information you can learn, but just the so many different pathways in the law. This one time I met this woman. She was a veterinarian lawyer. I didn't I didn't even know that was a thing.
Okay.
So, it was, I keep having these very eye-opening experiences, but it all comes together. Sort of shapes me in a way. And it just like
Right.
it shaped your career. Each time you learn something, you sort of adapt your worldview and the
Yep.
way that you see the law, which I
Yeah.
just found very interesting. Now, after law school, you became an attorney at Kendall, Brill, and Killiger. Did I say that right?
It's Kendall, Brill, and Klieger. It's now called Kendall, Brill, and Kelly. One of the name partners moved out. So I actually did some brief work at McDermott afterwards in general litigation. But pretty soon, within about a year of starting there, this opportunity actually came up, which was through one of my contacts at CBS. So I said that sometimes those things come back. Now CBS wasn't looking for anybody to start in-house, as a super junior attorney. Generally, in-house jobs want at least 5 years of experience because they don't want to train you. So I learned that when I was doing my first summer, that probably wouldn't be available to me for some time. But they knew people that were looking, in a boutique shop for somebody who wanted to do entertainment litigation. And that was Kendall, Brill, and Klieger at that point. So I moved from McDermott over there. Kendall Brill was an offshoot of Irel Manella, which has a very strong entertainment practice. And the guy who was the chair of the entertainment practice at Irel was Richard Kendall, and he started this boutique firm. So it seemed like a very interesting way to kind of get into the things that were really interesting to me, and move away from the big firm world, which I was already. I could kind of see that type of practice wasn't exactly what was interesting to me.
Yeah, I hope myself in the future. I don't look at a couch and it's like, wow, it looks like I'm sleeping here tonight. Uh,
Yeah,
but I only asked if I got the name right as well because I was on a little hot streak there. I got like 4 straight episodes of getting all the names right. I snapped it. It's all right
yeah.
though.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I always try to get it right, but like
Yeah,
that was a tough one, honestly. But I have to ask, you went back to school to get your PhD. What
yep,
went into that? Specifically focusing on public law and political
right,
theory, which it's fresh in the memory right now because last year
yep,
I took a class in public law
yep.
with Matthew Kirk, which this is the third episode I've said his name, my favorite teacher ever.
Okay,
Part of phenomenal public. I'm so interested in it. I've
yeah,
been waiting to talk about this with you.
yep.
But so what was the decision to go back to school? Why'd you do it?
So I had actually with Kendall Brill and with McDermott, I'd seen some of these appellate cases, and I started thinking about how you can understand the likelihood of winning one of these cases, and I started doing some kind of math in my head. Now I wasn't a math expert or statistics expert by any stretch, but I saw that there was some value there in terms of predicting an outcome and thinking about how you can tailor litigation based on what you think is going to happen at the end. And some of that is based on the judge, and some of that's based on the strength of your case. There was nobody really looking at the data side of this, thinking about it in terms of probabilities and then thinking about how you can change behavior because of that. That seemed really interesting to me, probably also because I was really into sports analytics in the early 2000s, and Moneyball and all that kind of stuff was going on in baseball. Analytics and sports were really hot topics, still are to some extent. But it seemed like you could kind of parlay that into how you think about legal practice also. So I had all these kind of big thoughts about how I could do things different and possibly, hopefully, better and more efficiently, down the road, but that there was very little buy-in and a very high barrier to entry into that. I'd done some reading on the side in quantitative studies of public law, kind of basic statistics at looking and thinking about outcomes and predicting likelihoods. And one of the teachers and authors that I was most interested in happened to be this woman, Lee Epstein, who was at Northwestern Law School and was just moving to USC Law School. And so I had, she was one of my inspirations in this. I was, thinking about, okay, how can I, do something related to this? She was coming to USC, so I sent her a cold email. Not cold in the sense that, I was brisk, but but she didn't know me from anybody. And asked, look, I'm thinking of going back and getting a PhD. I'd be really interested in working with you. Are you looking to work with grad students when you come back there? Because I know you're going to be part of the law school faculty. Is kind of your main gig there. And she said, yeah, for sure. As soon as you decide if that's right for you, let me know, and then I can get you on some projects if you do decide to come. I made a calculation at that point, which was probably one of the ones that had most profound effects on my life moving forward, both because it changed the trajectory a little bit, but also because it changed my finances dramatically. To go back and work on a pauper's stipend as a PhD student, doing a little bit of side hustling in law on the side, but primarily focusing on studies and specifically thinking about how I could study law, but also political science, and also from a quantitative perspective. And SC not only was that the place that Lee was going to be working at, but also was extremely flexible. As soon as I started talking to them about how if I came to do a PhD there, I could structure it in a way that really was interesting to me and my studies, and not necessarily down one of these paths that had already been created. So they were very flexible with me and let me work with people in law school and political science and psychology, really any departments that I wanted to pursue learning from, and having people on my dissertation committee from. They were, the USC was willing to allow me to do that kind of work. And so, right, it was a confluence of a bunch of these factors seemed to make sense at this point in time. And from where I'm standing now, I think it was a really good decision. But when I was doing it, I constantly doubted myself because it was such a big transition at that point. But we kind of change our perspectives as we get on down the road.
Yeah, so a lot there. First, I'd like to say, my roommate in college, very big into baseball analytics, always
Okay.
complaining about the new advanced stats.
Yeah.
There's a lot of players who are probably not that good, who are higher up in the advanced stats. People give them a lot more value. So
Right.
shout out to Max. I know he
Yeah.
loves it. Uh, but something you said before, which I thought was very interesting, talking about the analytics, talking about judicial behavior, you saw sort of value in that.
Yeah.
Can you sort of describe what value means to me? Because I love that word personally.
Yeah.
I think it's a very important thing in this world,
Yeah.
especially as an individual in any professional field that,
Yeah.
when you get into a company, when you work anywhere, like, I worked at ShopRite. But, every day I showed up, I looked to give the best value, put the apples away in the right places, sort of thing. Uh,
Right.
can you sort of describe what value means to you and how it has sort of influenced your career?
Yeah. Law is at the end of the day a kind of corporate practice. There's big organizations. They want to make money. So when we talk about value, I mean, I'm really thinking about the bottom line. And how do you get there? It's by thinking creatively and efficiently. And law is not always a efficient industry. I think we saw that in 2008 when kind of the bubble burst, and a lot of people that were the year after me in law school didn't have jobs because the legal market had just fallen into the tank. And so it became readily apparent to me that maybe the thinking behind the business part of law was not up to date. And so when I think about value, I think about how we can do things that cost less and that can make more. So how do you make things cost less? Well, you do things through some kind of automated system that is normally being done by a person. And there really weren't even people that were doing these cost benefit analyses of what it takes to get through a case, how you could do it differently, and how you could think about things differently in a way that maybe you don't have to do all of this work and all this research if there's a particular area of focus that's going to make a bigger difference in a given case. So it's not just looking at everything from 10,000 feet, but looking specifically at the elements that need focus and focusing on those, putting less emphasis on things that don't. And by doing this in a data-driven way, So looking at past decisions, looking at the case, how it stacks up, looking at, okay, what is going to be most effective, knowing that this is the material before us, and this is the judge, and this is what the judge has done. Trying to take as many factors together and pretty much put it on one piece of paper or one spreadsheet, as it has become now, and be able to make some decisions that are really based on economics to make things more efficient practice, and also to anticipate outcomes with much stronger likelihood. So it's much easier to tell a client, I think you have a 75% chance of winning, based on data that you can actually show them, rather than this hunch that I won 3 or 4 cases that were related to this area. So right, it's a lot of different moving parts, but I think it's a new way of thinking about law that people are just becoming accustomed with, and I'm hoping to kind of be on that cusp that I think is transitions law into becoming more of a 21st century field, like a lot of other professions.
This is really interesting for me because right now I'm getting the whole public law semester is coming, all the thoughts are coming to my head about judicial behavior, uh
Yeah,
and the models. I know there's the Attuno model, before the
yeah,
law, rat choice, all that
yeah.
fun stuff.
Uh-huh.
I have to ask, did you feel like this sort of because it seems like there was an opening in the legal market for this sort of statistics driven law. Do you feel like
Yeah.
you got into this like very early? You seem like you were very much on the forefront of it.
Yeah, I think in terms of where I stand in this, I was, because I don't have a math background, right? I think that there were people that were looking at analytics from a quantitative perspective, that were looking at past decisions primarily, where my interest was really forward looking. So there were people that were looking at, in political science, looking at 40 years of data in the past, but weren't looking to, okay, how does that affect legal practice right now? So in terms of looking forward facing, I think I was one of the early innovators in that, and that's why I think my blog Empirical SCOTUS has created such a niche within Supreme Court studies, is because it's really one of the first forward looking pieces of information, or sites of information, that's out there in the law. Nobody else is doing this, and it's a simple concept. It's just how can we look predictively and look at past trends to how we can make predictions. But yeah, I think that there were people that were backwards looking that were there already. There were people in different industries that were thinking along these lines, but there weren't very many people putting these things together. And that's not to say that analytics were totally outside of the law. I think in terms of people building up like discovery systems that can use AI and machine learning. I mean, that's been around for a while now, but it's ways to kind of get information in a different way, not ways of thinking and of legal practice necessarily.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on the pod, have someone on the podcast who's a pioneer, seemingly,
Yeah.
of the statistics-driven legal movement. It seems, from my perspective, I forgot to say before, I actually know who Lee Epstein is, which is
Okay.
absolutely crazy. He was,
Yes, that's
uh,
my world.
they're part of the syllabus for public law, so
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I had read their piece. I forget what it was, but I knew that name before, but I think what's interesting is it seems like this sort of statistics driven movement was it a creation of academia? Because I feel like it started there and now you've sort of took it into the mainstream of the legal field.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. Yeah, it started in political science. I mean, it's been, this idea of looking at ideology and, the things outside of doctrine that drive justices and judges' votes. That had been discussed really since the mid part of the 20th century, that these things affect decisions and that we can look at decisions in like larger numbers and see trends, right? They're not only like doctrine-based trends. The judges aren't coming in with a clean slate, tabula rasa, in each decision, and just kind of with this palette coming up with a decision. They have things going on in the back of their heads and previous decisions that affected them more or less. and they have their unique calculi. So I think that had been incorporated in political science for a while, but there aren't very many people working within the legal sphere that are using these tools from public law within political science to drive decision making. So that's really the juncture of where I feel like I'm a little bit different than the average political scientist looking at law.
So let's talk a little bit about your the SCOTUS blog. You
Yeah.
are the creator of it. Can you sort of describe what that is, what you do there, what you
Yeah.
look to sort of implore to the public?
Yeah. So, first, I think I should make the distinction. The SCOTUS blog is its own animal, and that's been kind of a beast in the Supreme Court space for years now. Before I got started working in this, that was started by Tom Goldstein, who is a Supreme Court practitioner. He's recently retired, and it mainly put out news about the Supreme Court, but also put out an annual stat pack. I knew about SCOTUS blog when I kind of got into this. In 2015, I created Empirical SCOTUS, which wasn't looking to piggyback on SCOTUSblog at all, but was where I was thinking, okay, there's this big vacuum in terms of space where the Supreme Court and data meet. And I've been doing all this work looking at political science and law now for a few years in a PhD program. How can I apply it to decisions that are being made in current terms, and justices that are sitting on the current court? So that was my idea behind Empirical SCOTUS. I have all of this methodology and all of this kind of exposed to all this information, and I think it could be used in a different fashion. So I started this, and actually, here's where it gets kind of interesting and the names start meeting. In 2017, 2018, I started running the statistics for SCOTUSblog, the bigger animal that predated me. So I started putting together their stat packs at the end of the terms. My blog became affiliated with the bigger blog, SCOTUSblog, and started publishing my content on there. As things a few years down the line changed over there, I went back to doing things mostly on my own and away from SCOTUSblog. We still have a good relationship, and so we kind of run on parallel tracks, but they do much more doctrinal reporting now, where I'm doing the data side, and they actually stopped running their data pack last term. So with a colleague of mine, Jake Truscott, we put out the only real stat pack that was comprehensive of last term was through Empirical SCOTUS. And so I believe this year again we're going to kind of be filling the space with an end of term synopsis of the statistics, and we'll be the only place that's going to have that.
I will be sure to read that myself. I'm very interested now, knowing a lot more about it, speaking to you right now. But I have to ask, I guess this is more of a question for me.
Yeah.
What sort of variables, what sort of factors are your models based upon? What sort of data do you put into it to see what the potential outcomes are?
Yeah. So Lee Epstein, one of the projects she had me starting on, probably the second project I worked with her on, was the Supreme Court database. Supreme Court database is this compendium of decisions. Now it's built through the back to the beginning of the Supreme Court in the 1790s. When I started, it went back to 1946, and part of what I was started on was the initiative to push it all the way back. Supreme Court database has like 40 variables for each Supreme Court decision. It tells you who the petitioner is, who the respondent is, what type of player are they? Are they government? Are they a private actor? Who the justice that authored the majority opinion is, what the lower court was. These are all different factors that we can put into an equation and see, okay, are these things meaningful? And are they meaningful for particular justices? So I started out by using the Supreme Court database to understand, okay, these are past trends. What do these tell us about the future? And this is all already pre-coded. So there's this massive information out there that political scientists are using, but the legal world is mostly not exposed to. So I started out using that, and that was like my primary vehicle for information and data on the Supreme Court. But I also started building out my own data, and that's some of which I've done on my own, some of which I've done with collaborators. And so now we have information about the texts of the decision, how long they are, how short they are, who's writing within specific issue areas, Some of that's covered by a Supreme Court database, but we've kind of revised how we think about issues before the Supreme Court, and different directions within the doctrine within each case. Can we code? Okay, this person might be pro speech, but anti, pro free speech generally, but anti speech attacking the government. Those nuances weren't covered in the Supreme Court database, but using NLP, natural language processing, we've been able to pull out information from the text and have even more data. So it's a combination of the Supreme Court database plus things that I've been developing on my own to develop a more complex, comprehensive set to understand the Supreme Court, and also distill it down to lower courts. And that data pretty much hasn't been curated by anybody else. There really isn't a great source of Court of Appeals information and district court information. So kind of building that out from scratch.
I know in the political science world, from what I've been experiencing in school now, I know the bit I don't know if it's a big argument, but people always talk about models. Do they work? Do they not work? What sort of trial and error has went into you creating all these big data sets and figuring out, can this really work?
Yeah. I mean, so I think when I got into this at the beginning, I had one of those aha moments where, I knew about ideology, I knew about, all of these different factors that could affect decision making, but I hadn't really focused on the, how good, how strong predictors they are. And, the fact that, okay, you can predict, even without all of that, you can predict the likelihood of over 60% of how the justices are going to vote just by knowing who the petitioner is. The justices vote to reverse over 60% of the time. So, if you're going to Vegas and, you could bet on black or red, you bet on the petitioner each time, you're going to, end up making a profit at the end of the day. So, right, anything that can give us a better odds than flipping a coin is helpful. So, okay, I'm starting to think along these new lines. This can help us understand things. But just being a little bit more flexible than just saying that it's like these clear things that are driving decision making. Some of these are clear, but some of these you have to kind of back out. Maybe a justice isn't even that cognizant, and maybe a trend hasn't been pulled out about things that drive them. Maybe there's a attorney that's arguing cases that they're really enamored with, and they might be voting for more often. So the more information that we have put together, and this just involves thinking creatively. Okay, these are the things we've already accounted for. This might be affecting a decision. Let's spend an hour or 2 hours trying to dig up a little bit of data, pilot it, and see if there's anything there. So there's a lot of those, and sometimes those stick you down big rabbit holes, especially when you're a doctoral student looking to publish papers. Sometimes that'll be days and weeks and months of rabbit holes. And I did quite a bit of that. I just put out, I think, my 15th and 16th publication. Just got the hard copies back for the 16th. And I mean, that's nothing in terms of comparing it to a career political scientist or legal scholar, but for somebody who did most of that as a PhD student, it was a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of interesting things, and finding some things that seemed really interesting were just a big waste of time. So it's it's going down the rabbit holes, it's trying different things out, and if that really sparks your curiosity like it did me, it's worthwhile for those moments where you find that you've discovered something that hasn't been talked about before.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think going back, I wish the casino worked like that as well. I wish we knew coming in, but
Yeah,
that they take your money. That's what it's all
yeah,
for. But I think what's even more interesting is the sort of rabbit holes that you've went down. I've went in my short 20 years, I've went down a couple rabbit holes myself. But, a lot, when you watch YouTube for long enough, you're bound to find something absolutely crazy that you sort of drop in. And I find it comforting for myself that, there are things out there that, you can find and pique your curiosity and sort of, pursue like you did. Uh, I think that's amazing, and I'm happy to hear. And also, congratulations on the 15th and 16th publication. That's big stuff right there. Uh,
getting some stuff out there. Yeah, appreciate it.
and I just think I lost my train of thought. But besides that, I'll remember it later. Kind of connecting to the optimized legal solutions, the
Yeah.
position that you work in currently. Is this using the probabilities with smaller firms?
Yeah, right. So optimized legal is one of these hats that I wear right now. It's my own private consulting, which I'm actually hopefully building out and taking on some additional employees soon, because it's building to a place where it's I need some more person power. So what it is developing unique data sets for particular problems. Supreme Court data sets are already out there, and that's like pretty much the only used data set that is accepted across a field within law, within public law. So, right, there's lots of economic data sets that deal with anything from criminal law to actual economics. But right, there's only one Supreme Court database, and that doesn't help practitioners argue cases before any court aside from the Supreme Court. And that's where most of the law happens. So optimized legal is really a vehicle for me to create unique data sets for different problems that lawyers face, different problems that companies face that are hiring lawyers, interest groups, politicians, hedge funds. I've kind of worked with all these different groups who have some stake in legal claims, but want to have some kind of data-driven approach to help them along. And I think both by creating kind of a name and a brand for myself, by doing this work for now really over 10 years, I have some credibility that it comes word of mouth, right? People know that you're doing this, that you're unique within a field. This is helpful. So the more people that I've worked with, the more opportunities there are there, and it's really about creating unique data for particular situations, which is time consuming, but which adds a lot of value, right? Something that lawyers aren't usually thinking about. But when people have to make decisions that have economic repercussions, then being able to provide some kind of assessment of the finances and likelihood of success has a lot of value. So that's what I do. It's mainly federal appeals and district court matters. It's been some Supreme Court matters, but typically Supreme Court attorneys think that they know best, and so it's hard to convince them that there's something that a data analyst can tell them that they don't already know. But for lower court practitioners, there's much more room there. And so, by showing them, okay, this is what I've done in the past, these are the people I've worked with, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, I'll be honest, you got me hooked.
Oh, well, I'm doing my thing now.
This is fascinating. I've never heard of this sort of data driven. I mean, I took public law, so I know a little bit about judicial behavior and, the predictive power of things. But,
Yeah.
I think bringing this to the lower level is a fascinating idea. I'm bought in. I can't give you any money, but I'm bought in.
But in a few months, come back to me, because we're actually developing. I with some collaborators are developing some software to start automating some of this, so we don't have to develop something new each time. So I can't say much about this now, but I can say that within a few months, I will have something out there that's also unique, and that is something that can be used without a lot of human intervention. So it's constantly trying to come up with something different and newer and more exciting. So that's part of the toolkit.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like you've struck on a gold mine here, but
No.
you've led into my next question that I was going to ask, which I'm interested in. Obviously, it's 2024 craziness.
Yeah.
Next year's 2025. I know
Right.
for my Call of Duty players, Nuketown's coming, but I have to ask, have you been incorporating AI? How does AI shape what you're doing now going into the future?
Yeah. It's a good question, and it's something I'm still working out in my head. So as soon as I knew about ChatGPT and that something like this was coming on the market, I started looking for people that were familiar with the interface and large language models, knowing that it's very similar to some of the machine learning that I've been working in, but that it requires a set of tools that I don't have on my own, and that I know other people did, and that might be interested in working together. So somebody without a background in law that'd be interested in getting involved in legal projects, but has a background in computers. And that's, the person that I found that I'm working with now. So yeah, I could see early on with AI and the way things were changing that there's incredible value there for the stuff that I'm doing. So I'm trying to leverage that. Now, some downsides to ChatGPT style AI is that generally it's built off of what's available on the internet. And so it doesn't know necessarily what is better information, what's worse information. So the first thing that I realized is that we're going to have to be able to add in our own data for it to be able to make decisions and choices on. So in terms of pulling the data together, it's not uniquely helpful. But once the data is together, the way of managing it, thinking about it, and also updating it is very different. So it's a great tool. I think there will be a lot of value in it. But just saying AI is there is not going to be enough. It's how we can figure out how to leverage that with new sources of data, and figuring out how that's going to save us time, energy, and money down the line. That's still a question that I'm working with. But like I said, developing some software. It's based around some of this new AI that's out there. We're developing large language models, developing with both AI and machine learning, and look, this is cutting edge technology, and it's very, very much aligned with the work that I do. So it will inevitably play a role in what I do. But we're just at the early phases of seeing where this takes us. So I don't want to bind myself too early to a particular approach, but learn more about it and see how I can leverage it for the things that I'm looking to do.
Yeah, with AI, I remember I found ChatGPT. I think it was my freshman year of college, so 2 years ago. I remember I sat there for like 4 hours. I was just talking to it forever, and
Yeah,
I was like, this is I never really came across anything like it,
yeah,
and I found it extremely fascinating. And as time went on, I've kept up with a lot of stuff going in AI. I find it very, very interesting, sort of topic. I'm a philosophy major, so there's a lot of ethical issues around it. There's
oh
so
yeah,
many things surrounding it. And like you said, it's very cutting edge technology, even
right,
in the sort of Silicon Valley tech sector. Everyone's playing a game of one-upsmanship. Who
right,
who can make the better AI?
yeah,
I think for yourself, it's just going to be a very interesting next couple of years. I know Google just came out with they've had Bard for a while, but they keep updating it, and obviously ChatGPT. I just went from three, there was like 3.5 to four
yeah,
now.
before,
So there's so much going on. There's a ton of movement, and
yeah.
especially in I'm very interested in.
Yeah,
I'm
but it comes with a word of caution, though. Chief Justice Roberts puts out the end of the year report each December 31st, and has some kind of topic that he focuses on. This year was on AI, and he talks about the anecdote that had kind of gone around legal circles as last year of a firm that relied on ChatGPT to write a brief, and the system created cases that didn't really exist. So I think at the outset, people are overly reliant on the technology, not knowing what it can and can't do. And that was a word of caution. So, I think it's great. I think it's potential to be very helpful, but we can't just assume it's making the correct decisions for us. And it's still at this point in the technology, very important for human intervention to actually make sure that the things it spits out are accurate. So it's not going to be, take over jobs, in large masses right at the outset. But we have to figure out the best ways to use it and what it's capable of and what it's not capable.
Yeah, I saw something very interesting on LinkedIn. It might have been your post. Someone was speaking about AI in the legal field, and they were talking about how it's a tool at the end of the day. At the end of the day, just like we have an iPhone, we can use Safari, we can, look up whatever we need. It should be used in a sort of tool way. I know I recently just got a syllabus for a class this next semester, and I was reading through it, and the teacher had left in a little anecdote about ChatGPT and sort of AI tools, and she sort of said that you can use it. Obviously, don't let it write all your papers, but use it as a tool, use it as a sort of way to get a better understanding of the material, or sort of get topic ideas, sort of like that. I think it's very useful for that, and I've used it myself for those kind of abilities. um, but I think obviously going forward, it's going to be a very interesting topic. Obviously, the made up court cases, I'd seen that, I read about it. That was crazy.
Yeah,
Um, but I think going forward, there's so much around it. and it's just going to keep growing. It's just going to keep getting stronger and smarter and more intelligent and more cutting edge. And I'm very excited to see what comes with it in the future.
So am I.
Um, but to change gears a little bit, going back to something you said a little bit ago, you talked about getting a position, getting, optimized legal solutions off the ground, sort of word of mouth, that sort of networking. Can you describe the importance of networking and how it's had an impact on your career?
Yeah. So I've kind of clumped networking and brand building into the same kind of sphere where I could see very early on that first off, when I started the blog, it wasn't like it grabbed great attention right at the outset. But I knew some people working within law and technology, and some people, I knew of them. So yeah, when I started writing this stuff, I started sending out pieces and trying to get in touch with people, kind of similar to how you got in touch with me, looking them up on, for me at that point, it was mostly Twitter. But people like David Latt, who was at Above the Law, that had a decent following at that point, getting in touch with him and saying, "Hey, have you seen this? You're writing about the ages at which Supreme Court justices retire. This is the actual statistic of that." And, somebody like David said, "Oh, wow, this is great. Let me, showcase a little bit about what this guy's doing." And so I started out, that way, trying to get in touch with people who could help, put my work into more of a spotlight, and develop that, and moved, from there to trying to become this expert within the area of Supreme Court and data analysis. And as I continued to build that brand and people knew more about me, then I found out different ways to showcase what I do. So, that was when I started looking at doing some projects with different people that were in the legal sphere that could actually use this stuff, and, saying, okay, I'll put in my time, and, for very little money on the back end, if, you can help publicize this a little bit. And so did that for a few projects, and realized that there were other people interested in this. I've been putting in a lot more time on LinkedIn than other social media platforms lately, and that has, provided, great kind of rewards also in getting to know people within the legal business world that I hadn't known in the past that have become clients of mine. I find that putting in the time sometimes leads to nothing. But oftentimes, if you put something unique and interesting out there and you show the right people and you get to know them, that there are other ways to interface with your work, and, that helps build a reputation. So sometimes doing stuff, pro bono, as it were, can yield, big rewards down the road.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy that you brought up something such of building a brand. I think that's something today that a lot of people don't talk about. I think it's an extremely important sort of part of anyone's life, especially the professional life. It's almost integral to it. I'm very interested in the entrepreneur land. I listen to a lot of startup podcasts, and they always talk about building a brand. And I think it really isn't something that people talk about, and I'm very happy you brought that up. Sort of very much switching gears here, but going back to sort of optimized legal solutions, and comparing it to the sort of Supreme Court justice data set that they have, do you feel like the larger data sets are have a little less predictive power than the smaller ones, or is it the other way around?
It's a good question. I don't think there's necessarily a clear answer to that. You build a large data set and you have a lot of factors in it, then you can make pretty big generalizations. I mean, that's the, look, if you're looking to make a prediction for a company in a specific like lawsuit, you don't need all of that data. But if I have a company that's asking me, okay, which attorneys should I pick based on their success, then I need a large data set. So some of it depends on what the question is, and how broad of a question it is. So because sometimes you can just distill down a bigger data set to something smaller and then add a few other variables, and that's all you need. So it's tailoring to specific situations. But it's best not to have to reinvent the wheel every time you need to do something. So if you can use something that's already been created, then that saves you a lot of time and energy. But yeah, depending on the individual question, oftentimes there's data digging that needs to go on beyond that.
It's fascinating to me. I had to ask that question because that was sort of the thought that was floating around my head. Uh,
Yep.
Last two questions here. So you're always working. You got legal optimized solutions. You got the Empirical SCOTUSblog. You're always writing on LinkedIn. But Adam, what does a typical Friday night or Sunday morning look for you?
Oh, so that's a good question. Friday nights are usually, mostly off the computer. I would say I'm never entirely off, but that's, I'd much rather be doing that because I'm doing it for myself and my work rather than doing it for somebody who's looking over my shoulder telling me you need to do this. So that's another thing I've discovered on on this road that, I like having that flexibility and that's important to me, which wasn't apparent earlier on in my life. So I never totally shut off. But Friday night's often family night. I live in LA. My family's in LA. We oftentimes do a Friday night dinner together. And so that's Friday night. I mean, weekends are you never know. It might be doing some work. It might be doing taking kids to a birthday party. So many possibilities for what goes on a weekend. I don't think there is anything typical. I'd like to say I watch football on the weekends, but it really depends on the games. And I'm also a generalist. I used to play a lot of fantasy football, so that used to dominate more of my Sundays. But now I'm trying to get out a little bit more, oftentimes at the beach. So one of the benefits of living on the West Coast is that even when it's not summer weather, it's generally sunny outside. So you can at least go there and sit if you're not even if you aren't going in the water. So making use of the beautiful landscape that is Los Angeles. That's one of the reasons why I'm still out here. And so I want to make sure that I get the most use out of that I can.
Yeah, I still have yet to get to California in my life.
Uh, I
I would
can't believe you're hearing that.
I know it's so unfortunate. I'm here in New York though, and
Yeah,
it's like 32 degrees outside. I gotta wear a jacket.
so I've heard. Yeah,
It's I can't I one of my big goals is just to be in a place where it's always sunny because I love being outside. I love the
yeah,
sun and I love it being warm. So I'm very happy to hear that. If I ever go out to California, a beach will always be waiting for me with the sun shining. Uh
yeah. And now, post COVID and post COVID, so many things have gone on Zoom that I used to have to travel. A lot of people I work with are on the East Coast. I oftentimes work on East Coast time, DC and New York, primarily. But now almost everyth's on Zoom. I don't, I can stay in my generally nice warm house or outside at the beach, and look at people in the freezing winter on the East Coast and feel sorry for them, but not that sorry.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, please don't feel sorry for me.
No, no, no. I
I'm still
just
working and I'm still getting through
yes,
the harsh winters, especially when I go back up to school in Albany. It
yep.
it's even more snow, more rain. It's just
Upstate, yeah, it's brutal.
but at the end of the day, I love it though. I still
Yeah,
do love it. Even if the weather is unforgiving, I still
yeah.
love the city of Albany. So at the end of every episode, I always have the words of wisdom. So, Adam, what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring lawyers, the current law students, or even the legal professionals out there?
Oh, I think find what's interesting to you. Don't just decide that it's the right thing because it seems right, but actually try to experience different things. For a law student, that means not deciding that you want to necessarily unless you're 100% sure. And I don't think most people are. Trying out different things. That's why law school is such a great place for aspiring lawyers. There's groups, there's clubs, there's internships. There's so much stuff that most law schools have in terms of resources that getting to experience different things can open new doors. So don't be foreclosed to different possibilities. Be flexible. And sometimes things that don't seem perfect at one point work out down the road. So don't always come to conclusions until you actually get to that end of the road. But if you're like me and you don't actually know for certain that this is 100% what you want to do at the end of the day, then be flexible and be open to opportunities because sometimes those opportunities are going to show you that there's something even better out there.
Well, Adam, I couldn't agree more. And that's the pod. Thank you so much for coming on, Adam. I really do appreciate it. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.